All right, so welcome everybody online, different platforms, and welcome Jason Stanley. How are
Thank
you
you very
doing?
much.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about tonight. We had a lot to talk about yesterday before the so-called debate, and now we have even more evidence in front of us. The title of the program is How Fascism Works and How to Stop It, a dialogue. Can it happen here? Is it happening here? And what to do? So you want to
Thank
start, Jason?
Yes, thank you, Andy. So my book was published 2 years ago in September 2018. At the time, people charged me with alarmism. Uh, people said that now I would like nothing more than to be wrong, than to have been wrong. However, I'm concerned that events have, if anything, vindicated the concerns that I was raising in my work. The reasons people gave for why I was being alarmist is they said things like fascism requires an informal militia on the streets. It requires a relationship between the leader and militias on the streets. And we see no such development in the United States. We do not see white supremacist militias being organized to defend the fascist social and political movement. I think that's one case where we see that we were presented with a reason for why the call for the description fascism was overwrought, and I think that has been met. We saw yesterday in the debate Trump talking to the Proud Boys, telling them to stand down and stand by. There is clearly some kind of between leader and militias. That's the concern here. Now, no one would like to be wrong more than me, let me add. So the second reason that people gave for why calls for fascism were overblown was that the president was not calling into question the democratic system. The president wasn't claiming that elections were rigged. The system was corrupt. The president was not saying that it's either me or the system is rigged. He wasn't directly attacking democracy. Well, I think we see that the president is directly attacking democracy. So again, I would like to be wrong. No one would like to be wrong more than me in this project. And I would like to go back to working on the semicolon or whatever god-awful things I used to do before this. However, that is not the situation in which we find ourselves. Third, the reason that people gave to say that my concern about incipient fascism was alarmist was that the president was not taking control of the party and taking control of the institutions of government. The institutions were supposedly still independent, according to the critics of my work. Fascism is a cult of the leader. It's a cult of the leader who promises national restoration in the face of supposed threats by immigrants, minorities, and leftists. And people said, the Republican Party is not a cult of the leader. The Republican Party is not the same as Trumpism. We're not seeing the courts being taken over, the institutions being taken over by a cult of the leader, by devotion to the leader. There, too, my concern is that we have seen significant progress on that particular front. People say, when you talk about fascism and you say Trump is a fascist, Trump is a fascist. Trumpism is a fascist social and political movement. People say, well, that Trump isn't at all like he isn't German or Italian. He's very American. Well, that's a conceptual error about fascism. All fascism must be local. All fascism is palingenic ultranationalism. It's a leader who says, I am the country, and I promise to restore the country's greatness. That leader must remind everybody in the country of the most. They must be the most archetypical member of that country. The fact that Trump, you couldn't be more American than President Trump, is not an argument that he isn't a possible fascist leader. It's an argument that he is a possible fascist leader.
I have to just start by saying I agree with you. And I think I even said this when we spoke after your book came out that we were getting into, and I think I was a little bit coming at that point quite a bit saying we had already formed Refuse Fascism, that this is fascism. And I said exactly what you said here. I'd never wanted to be wrong so much, but this is what we're facing. So look, I think what we'll do is I have some points that I'd like to make too. There's a lot of overlap. I'm in fact going to modify some things because I thought you touched a lot of things. I have to say, when I was rereading your book, How Fascism Works, I said, my gosh, so much of this has actually come to pass, as you just brought out. It was I guess on one level it's edifying, but it's also frightening and extremely serious. So here's what I want to say to people today that could frame our discussion. One, I'm going to make two overarching points that I hope people get out of our entire discussion. There'll be differences. There are differences between us on this, but it's differences within a framework. But my 2 points are, first, that we are in the midst of a rolling coup of the Trump-Pence regime. Okay, so, but we are in the midst of a rolling coup, and we saw part of that last night from Donald Trump. Second, now is the time that we have to act to prevent them from carrying this all the way through. So I will make a few more points that'll introduce this, that will frame our discussion or add points to it. And these bullet points are going to provide some framework for these two main points that I'm trying to make. I do believe we are facing a fascist regime, and I'm saying that not to get into an argument over definitions, because I think actually when we parse this out, there's quite a bit of similarity, but there's probably a difference there too. But we are facing a fascist regime that has truly made horrific and momentous progress in bringing about and advancing a fascist America. This is a regime that is tearing up the rule of law. And at the heart of fascism is that. All the 10 characteristics in your book and more, all of this is part of fascism. But ultimately, to enforce the kind of world that Jason was just talking about in terms of the white supremacy, the patriarchy, the xenophobia, which means the hatred of foreigners, all of this can only be instituted with ultimately a change in the form of rule, where that rule is the rule of the leader. It is the rule of the fascist party, which is being forged through this Republican Party. But look, this is a regime that demonizes immigrants, black people, LGBTQ people, women, Native Americans, the media, and peaceful protesters. This is a regime that opposes science, as you brought out. This is leading to a country right now that is literally burning and drowning at the same time into unbelievable unnecessary death from COVID. A lot of what I've been speaking about comes from a pamphlet that was issued on August 1st by Bob Avakian on the immediate critical situation, the urgent need to drive out the fascist Trump-Pence regime, voting in this election, and the fundamental need for revolution. But the thing about this pamphlet is it really goes into the fundamental change. The heart of this fascism is, when you, as you were just talking, when there's no longer a rule of law, then all the things, if you're an immigrants' rights activist, if you're a Black Lives Matter activist, if you're working on the climate, everything you've been working for, that gets wiped off the books.
So my book, my 2018 book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them, was actually about fascist tactics, all of which I think we see employed here. For example, Chapter 9 is called Sodom and Gomorrah. You represent the cities as dens of iniquity, as filled with foreigners and immigrants and leftists and crime and burning, and you run against the cities. That's what you run against the cities to draw a kind of anti-urban, anti-minority anti-elite vote. We certainly see that tactic being employed in this election.
And at the core of this regime is an unholy alliance between Trump and a Christian fascist movement that has been developing in this country for decades. And they are organized. They are organized up into the military. They have been organized up into the military. They're organized into police forces. They're organized into communities. And this is the core of this regime. This is the organization that people used to challenge you with, Jason, and say, well, where's the organization? Well, there's an organization there that nobody would have ever believed that Trump would come to head a Christian fascist movement. But that is actually what happened, and that is the Faustian bargain that they both made, and some of this is brought to bear in Michael Cohen's new book, Chapter 6. So there you go, a plug for that thug. And Trump also unleashes, and you brought this out, in the basest white supremacist, racist heart of America in a way that we've seen before in this country. We can't forget that, but it's brought it to what used to be dog whistles are now for real. Yes, they have not yet fully consolidated fascist rule. That is true for now, but that should give us no comfort. That's my second point. Now, you can say that, as I understand, you're saying that a regime means fully consolidated fascist rule. I'm saying there's a regime there that has not consolidated the rule over the country. We can talk about if there's much meaning to that without going to the semicolon. 3, there is, as I said, a rolling coup that is barreling towards a showdown around the election. Trump is already stealing this election. He has a plan in place to use key institutions, the Supreme Court, violent thugs, in and out of uniform, to keep his regime in power. That is why it is so urgent that people take up, from many different points of view, the call that Refuse Fascism has put out to form a broad-based movement, Trump Pence out now, a broad-based movement of many diverse political views that has one demand that crosses over, or put it differently, where every single demand, every single aspiration for a decent life has to go through removing this regime from power. For if it succeeds in power, all your dreams and aspirations for a decent life, for Black Lives Matter, for immigrant rights, for the climate, for not even be subjected to nuclear war. We can't forget that this man says if we have nuclear weapons, why can't we use them? All of this is why it's so urgent. We're 34 days away from an election. The Trump-Pence regime is undermining voting rights right now. What he lied about in the debate around what happened in Philadelphia, nonetheless, that he was thrown out, that his people were thrown out, is they went there to intimidate voters. The Christian fundamentalists have already organized 10,000 people to be poll watchers. He and his fascist groups said they're going to mobilize 50,000 former and in and out of uniform military and police to be poll watchers, which really means poll intimidators, and particularly against Black and Latino people. This regime has repeatedly told us, and they've shown us, that they are preparing to stay in power by any and all means. That is the point at which Jason just warned of, that we're not at yet, but we could be. Last night, when Donald Trump was given the chance to say would he respect the election, he would not do it. He said the election will be a fraud and illegitimate. He is now, and as I just said, and he's called it out, and he called out his poll watchers in the debate. These are anti-Semitic and fascist and racist thugs. And he said that he will win this because he has stacked the courts. That was the meaning of what he said. Chris Wallace asked him this directly. Another example, we could talk about this for a long time today, of all the things that have shown him undermining the elections, which would ultimately be undermining those democratic institutions that people are counting on. His attorney general, he has turned into his private lawyer and the lawyer of the regime. He has backed up this whole campaign to delegitimize the election with false claims. He backed Trump up on all the stuff about the post office. I'm not going to take the time to go into that. People know about it. We can talk about it. He's threatened people who protest on the eve of the election, or rather on the election night, with sedition. This is a very serious thing. Why should we not take him seriously? Is there anything that's been indicated that this is a fascist tactic that could actually lead to fascist rule, should they actually do it? He's been defending Trump as the one ruler and not the rule of law. So look, I would say, just to make this point, bring this rolling coup point, there's every evidence that the Trump-Pence regime will not accept the election results if he loses. And his losing, by the way, is not a sure thing. Far from it. All this stuff that Trump does is not just some madman talking, but this is actually has a purpose. It demoralizes and it intimidates the opposition, including from going to the polls.
I don't think it's the strategy the Trump administration seems to be following is to try to convince people that election day will decide things. We know what they've done. It's actually quite remarkably James Bond villanesque. What they've done is they've convinced their supporters that COVID is not to be taken seriously. So if you look at the people who plan on voting on election day in person, they massively favor Trump. Then if you look at the people who plan to vote by mail, they even much more massively favor Biden. So what they're going to do is what the plan seems to be is to declare victory on election eve, and say, well, it's the end of the election, and before the votes are counted. And then so what we have to do is we have to think not in terms of election day, but in terms of election month. It's going to be a while before the full results are in. And Biden will have to win by a lot in order to, and I think he will win by a lot as long as we get everyone we know out to vote. But we have to be on the streets because they will try to steal the election using the fact that they have a large same-day in-person voting election advantage. So we absolutely need to be on the streets.
The Biden campaign and the Democratic Party leadership have told us and shown us that they are not going to fight Trump the way he needs to be fought. They want to play by rules that the Trump-Pence regime wants to and needs to shatter to bring about this program. The Democratic Party strategy is to appease swing voters in swing states, to be, as Biden said this last night, to be bipartisan with fascists, to conciliate and not take seriously nor mobilize the tens of millions who feel that we must act against the threats of Trump. And to be clear, Biden did not use the word fascist. He said, I will be president of all the people, of the Republicans and Democrats. But I would submit that that Republican Party has been so hollowed out and so dominated, they didn't even have a party platform this year. Their party platform was to support Trump, okay? That's a telling thing. But it is really an emotional thing to think of what, if this regime stays in power, what this is going to mean for the people of the world and the people of this country. You know, it's almost unbelievable to me that we could be sitting here at this point in October almost of 2020 with tens of thousands of people in concentration camps on the border, COVID hotbeds with people being deported. I could walk through every single thing that this regime is doing, and that would take up our full hour and a half. I'll just leave it at that. Imagine a second term here and we should get into this. There actually will be, in my opinion, a genocide. I just want to say something about genocide, which means the killing of whole peoples. Actually, technically, it means even less than that, but ultimately, that's what it means. This country was founded on a genocide. Slavery was essentially a genocide. The betrayal of Reconstruction had genocidal elements. And then the new Jim Crow. It is a genocide to incarcerate 2.3 million people. And then what the police have done to people. I mean, for God's sake, imagine these people in power. Now, what I want to say about the genocide of the Nazi Germany in the Holocaust, that wasn't the plan that Hitler had, as you've spoken of yourself, Jason. The plan was to deport Jews, to get them out of Germany, and then eventually, as they expanded Germany, to get them on the other side, deep into Russia. But the exigencies of the war, the problems they ran into in the war, particularly against the then Soviet Union, led them at a certain point fairly late in the game, 8 years into the game, before they took a decision to exterminate the Jews. Every aspiration people have for justice or for a decent world now has to go through removing this regime. I'm going to try and be brief in my last 2 points. If Trump doesn't win by a landslide on election day, they are preparing for everything I just said. They are preparing to take power by any and all means necessary. What does the history that we faced in the last 3 years tell us? That he doesn't do the things he says he's going to do? He's tried to do everything he said he would do, and he's succeeded at many of them. This is why we have to begin this fight right now. It'd be too late to mobilize later on. Yes, people should vote in big numbers against Trump, which means voting for the Democratic Party candidate Biden. This is not a time for a protest vote, okay? This is a time to vote against Donald Trump. And if you don't do that, shame on you. This is going to be on you. But if we only rely on voting, it's going to be disastrous. And if we only wait to act till after Trump has stolen the election with his thugs in the street and his military or National Guard mobilized, you won't do it. And not only that, Biden told you last night not to do it. And the organizations who I hope to be seen in the public square this month, who have said they're not going to go out in the streets until after it's stolen. I want to tell you what Biden said last night. After telling the Proud Boys to stand down and stand by, this is what Trump's actually said, stand by, which can only mean we'll see how the election goes. So this is after I'm trying to shorten this now. He said that the ballots are going to, he would not say that he would honor the election. Let me just back up. He said he would not honor the election. He said there's thousands of ballots being manipulated. I can't go along with that. And he told his paramilitary, or rather his thugs, to stand by. But then Chris Wallace said, Vice President Biden, final question for you. Will you urge your supporters to stay calm while the vote is counted? And will you pledge not to declare victory until the election is independently certified? Okay, there's a little trap in there with the word calm. But essentially, Biden's answer was, here's the deal, his favorite phrase. The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why? Because once the winner is declared, and after all the ballots are counted, all the votes are counted, that'll be the end of it. That'll be the end of it. And if it's me, in fact, fine. If it's not me, I'll support the outcome. I'll be president, not just for the Democrats, I'll be president for Democrats and Republicans. Look, Biden was clearly saying to people, don't get out in the streets in major ways. I'm not saying that he won't say, stand guard outside or be outside a place where votes are being counted. But this is not a Sunday school exercise here. What Trump is preparing for is deadly serious. This is why what we're calling for is non-violent, sustained protest. All different views. I want to see never-Trumpers. I want to see Democrats. I want to see Bernie people. I want to see anarchists. I want to see my people, the revolutionary communists, out into the streets here and organizing this. Joshua Shanes was quoting another fascist scholar who studied a particular town in Germany. He said in the 30s, he said, the thing that was missing is there was not a united front of the decent people. Yeah.
Thalberg.
I think that's who it was. Not a united front of the decent people. That's what we actually need.
I think democracy is unusual. Democracy is unique. Most countries live under some form of authoritarianism, some kind of banana republic dictatorship. Democracy only works if we all are devoted to it. We have differences amongst each other. Some of us are religious Christians or religious Muslims or Jews. Others are secular, humanist secular. Some are gay, some are straight. We come from different paths. But a democracy is about us all living together and being devoted to that system. I truly believe we face a moment where we are risking this system. I think this isn't going to be good for anyone, even those who think they will gain from it. Let's get out there on the streets peacefully. Let's not give any photo ops for the opposition, for further recrimination and crackdowns. Let's get people to the polls, get young people to the polls, get everyone to the polls. And let's remember, this isn't going to be election day, it's going to be election week or election month. See you on the other end.
Okay, I think that's an important message. I want to say to people, you know, when Jason just spoke of all the different kinds of people who need to be involved and the differences over how we eventually get to a just world, what better way to begin to have that dialogue and debate than standing together against what would be a great horror? For now, be well and stay safe and keep spreading the word about fascism, Jason. Thank you for doing this program with Revolution Books. And good night to everybody who's watching.